Hello everybody, Jake your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, it's Monday. On Mondays we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays we wear pink.
I mean, it's just plastic. It's really just...
So I wanted to bring you this tier list because people have been asking when I've been streaming. I don't have a Tinkaton tier list out, so this is going to be it. This is Tinkaton. This is Next Steps Part 2. I'm adding Tink to the list, and this is where we were at before Tink buffs, and before the Next Steps Part 2 patch. I'm going to go through every Pokemon with you. This will not be as long as some of my other tier lists because we already have sort of what I think of the meta right now. I'll move some things up and down depending on my take on it, and then we will have a tier list here. So this is about what I thought things were looking like in the first Next Steps patch. Psyduck clearly sitting in the God tier. I think Psyduck may still be our God tier Pokemon, but I do think it was nice that they nerfed it. I might keep it right here. For now, I'm going to move it down to our S tier. Continuing on in our S tier, Miraidon I think is one of the best attackers in the game. I wouldn't move it. I think it's incredible. Darkrai got some recent nerfs, and I gotta tell you, I actually think Darkrai is not... Look, there are still some things about Darkrai that are phenomenally broken. I'm not saying it's not insanely good, but I actually am going to move it out of our S tier. I'm going to move Darkrai up to our A+ tier. I'll continue to kind of look at the situation. I think Shadow Claw is quite bad. I still think Dark Pulse Nasty Plot is probably the way to go, but they nerfed it enough to where it doesn't get guaranteed KOs as easily. This is going to be an interesting one. A+ might even be too high. Maybe it's an A tier Pokemon right now. Umbreon is, for my money, still one of the best Pokemon in the game, period. I think it's insanely good. S tier for sure. Zacian, I'm going to move down to our A+ tier. I might move it further, but I'm not sure. I think Zacian, the Metal Claw nerfs were clearly, they were clearly felt by this Pokemon, right? It looks like that build is falling off a cliff, but I still do think Sacred Sword is probably pretty strong. However, along with Darkrai, maybe I should be moving this down another tier here. I want to give it some time, wait and see. Mimikyu got nerfed. This last time I put Mimikyu in the S tier, this was for a just like strictly like solo looking tier list. I'm going to move Mimikyu down to our A+ tier as well. Not that I don't think Mimikyu is incredibly good. I just don't think, when I think of S tier, I think of clearly busted, and I don't think so. I think when it's fed and it doesn't have anything stopping it, you know, no crowd control or anything, it's clearly busted. But I think A+ is pretty fair. Like an insanely good Pokemon. Oh my gosh, I'm realizing as I go into this, I haven't told you about our tiers. Holy. We have our God tier. We're only going to put one Pokemon in our God tier. We're not frickin' Norse around here. We have our S tier. These Pokemon are a cut above the rest, cut above everything. I think they're some of the best in the game. We have our A+ tier. Insanely good Pokemon. Can oftentimes sneak through in a draft, but not always, right? Like Darkrai is an A+ right now, and that thing gets banned all the time. Really, really great Pokemon that do very well in this meta. A tier, solid choices, almost never banned, you'll notice in the A tier, but really, really powerful Pokemon. B+, they're good, better than I would say, I feel like B is kind of Then we have our B tier. I can't believe we had 1 week where I didn't realize we had the B tier. But we still have the B tier. These Pokemon are fine. There are definitely situations they work really well in. We have our C tier, nicknamed the Charizard tier because Charizard was C for so long, and I think it still might be in the C tier. And then we have, which these Pokemon are all kind of different levels of underwhelming. Then we have our Decidueye Memorial tier, where we have the worst of the worst. This tier named after Decidueye because it was so bad for so long. Sorry, back to our tier list here. We have Blissey. I'm not moving Blissey from the S tier. I think Blissey is probably still an S tier supporter, probably the best supporter in the game, but there is a supporter that I feel like is giving it a run for its money. So when I compare Pokemon, I'm often comparing supports against supports, you know, all-rounders against all-rounders. I try to compare things of similar roles, right? I'm not necessarily comparing Psyduck to Meowscarada or something like that. So just as an idea, a support might be in the S tier, but of course it might be kind of hard to solo carry with it. Moving to our A+ tier, Trevenant. I love Trev. I think it's an amazing defender, and it is staying in our A+ tier. Zarina got some buffs a little while back. I think the Stomp nerfs were maybe a little, like a teensy bit unfair, but at the same time, I still think this is A plus, just in a different way from where it was. I think Stomp was probably A plus, honestly, and now I think Triple Axel is a little closer to that. In the hands of a skilled player, Zarina is broken, just like Blaziken. These things are insane. In fact, a lot of the A plus tier, I'm looking at it right now, they require a really good pilot, someone who knows what these Pokemon are doing. Blaziken has just about everything going for it. I think it's incredible, and it's staying in A+. It has Rip. It has Secure. It's really strong. Its only issue is kind of a weak, progression to level 5, but that's just about it. Like, maybe you it really needs level 7, but still. Leafeon. Leafeon, for me, it's a really weird one, because if you are cracked at this game, Leafeon is insane, but I do think a lot of players are not going to get good value out of Leaf. I really don't think they are. Like Leafeon, Dodrio, Zarina, Zoroark moving down to our next tier. Like, a lot of these Pokemon require you to actually be really, really good with them, but if you are, you get huge value out of them. We just mentioned Dodrio. I think Dodrio's doing great. It's a Pokemon that works well in competitive and solo, duo, trio. It really doesn't have a place that it isn't a great Pokemon. However, there are some enemy comps that really shut it down. A lot of speedsters are like that. Greedent, staying where it is, needs an insanely good pilot. Hoopa, staying where it is, needs an insanely good pilot as well. Like, someone playing this Pokemon has to be really good. Eldegoss, on the other hand, I'm moving up to the S tier. So if you look at our S tier right here, you can see how valuable supporters are. Psyduck and Umbreon, essentially kind of defender slash support, right? Blissey and Eldegoss, in my opinion, having a good support on your team is the difference maker in my eyes in a lot of these games. And I think Eldy's change, it already was essentially one of the best things going in the game. A range supporter that slows. It's like, so its early game is amazing. It heals. It has shields. It has could be a team-wide ultimate, depending on how you use it, that also shoves opponents and also hurts opponents and heals allies. Like, LD is so good and has been for a while. Its change to just give you your plus moves at 10 and 12 just means it's more powerful throughout the course of the game. I'm going to move it to our S tier. Greninja, I'm moving up to our A plus tier. I think Greninja is one of the worst played Pokemon in the game, no question, because it's a free Pokemon and it's so cool, everyone wants to play it. But my recent couple weeks in solo queue have really reminded me that a super strong carry like Greninja is extremely valuable. And I do think the buffs this got a while back put it up into this category of A plus for me. Again, your Greninja will not be A plus, but Greninja is A plus. Ninetales, Pikachu. I'm going to keep these here in A. I think both extremely good attacker choices. I like them a lot. Sometimes they can be a little tough to carry games with, but when the enemies want to get in your face with, A9 and you hit them with that Blizzard Avalanche, it's incredible. Pika is just very, very good. Great Unite, can play well at kind of longer range with Thunder Thunderbolt, and really well as a shutdown with Electro Ball. Inteleon, I put A. Inteleon's a weird one. I still do think it's probably A, but maybe it's a little lower. It might be closer to B+. I don't know. There are times where I think Inteleon is crazy good, and there are times where I think Inteleon's fine. I'm probably going to keep it A. It has great mobility for an attacker, which is really nice. Mewtwo will stay in the A tier. I think Mewtwo is very, very good. It got buffed a little while back. It just really was never that bad in general. Decidueye is a Pokemon that I could probably move to the B+ tier. However, I didn't hate the changes to its defenses and Razor Leaf a little while back. I don't know if we need to see a ton of Razor Leaf Decidueyes, but I'll move it down to the B+ tier. I think it's very good though. Zoroark gonna stay here with the caveat that you got to be extremely good. Mamoswine, Lapras, Snorlax, all really solid defenders I have up in our A tier. Lapras, I think, is really good. I kind of wonder if Lapras feels a little more B+ to me at times. Same thing with Snorlax, but I do think Snorlax reminds me of a supporter in that if you're good with it, this thing feels crazy busted. Dragonite, probably A is fair, maybe B+. I feel like I just don't see it very much, to be fair. Umbreon with Wicked Blow, I'm going to move up to our A+ tier. I actually think Umbreon, Wicked Blow, its secure is so unbelievably good. It also brawls pretty well, and if you're skilled with this thing, Pokemon that move into a match that can not only fight, but also can be the deciding factor in an objective fight, I think are, very, very important, right? Metagross, I really love Metagross. Me personally, I think it's maybe closer to A+, but I'd keep Metagross and Metagross and Gyarados in the A tier. I like them both. They both have, I think Gary really has kind of one build that's the way to go, right? Bounce, Dragon Breath. I do think Metagross has a few different options, which is pretty cool. Ceruledge, I'm actually surprised that this thing didn't spike harder after getting a round of recent buffs. I'm going to keep it A, but I think this could be veering into the A+ tier again. Garchomp, moving down to our B+ tier. I think Garchomp, I was a little too harsh on the nerfs for Garchomp. I actually think it's still one of the best all-rounders in the game. I'm moving it up to our A+ tier. I saw the nerfs for Garchomp. I messed around with it a little bit. I thought maybe there was more to it. I still think Dragon Garchomp's insane. However, if you take Dig, Earthquake into account, you could probably move this down. Mime, I mean, B+ I think is fair. A is probably also pretty fair. We talked about Decidueye. Espeon, Gardevoir, Glaceon, these are all really good attackers. I think it's weird. I don't think any of the attackers are bad, but I also don't think many of the attackers just blow my mind as being unbelievably good right now. I do like Espeon, Gardevoir, and Glaceon. In this meta, I like them a little more than Delphox, and I really don't see much Candle. Mew is one of those ones, it's probably A, actually, but you just have to be insanely good with Mew. It actually is probably right here. And then maybe one of these other attackers is actually closer to A. They're all pretty good, to be fair. Armarouge would stay here. I think it's good, not amazing. I think they probably over-nerfed it. I think Meowscarada, Absol, Talon, Scyther, all these could reasonably hang out in B. I'm going to move Talon up to A, though. I actually think some of the changes for Talon were extremely good. I think Talon's Brave Bird, while it may not be a competitive build, even though some teams have been picking it up, I think that damage reduction is ludicrously good. And Talon's kind of gotten a nice little series of buffs over the past year-ish, year and a half, taking it from sort of a middle-of-the-road speedster to actually a really solid choice. There are certain comps it doesn't work well in, just like any speedster, but I think Talon's pretty good. I would keep the rest of them here. Ho-Oh, I don't really know what to say about this. I think it's better than it gets credit for, and it's worse at the same time. I think B+ is a fair place to put it. I don't know what to do with it. Blastoise is probably moving up to A for me. I think Surf and Hydro Pump is insanely good. You also get a lot of value out of Rapid Spin, right? But I think Surf Hydro Pump is crazy good. It's like the stuns are unbelievable with it. Slowbro is weird. You could probably put Slowbro in A. I'm going to keep it here with Lapras for now. That might not even be fair. Slowbro does better when it feels like catching one enemy is the difference in a lot of fights. And lately I've noticed it doesn't feel like that as much, even though a Shutdown Unite move is incredible. Urshifu, Surging Strikes, I don't see a ton of it. I don't think it's bad, but you never see it. Lucario, kind of same thing. I think Lucario is better than people think. It's probably closer to A. But at the same time, I don't see a lot of it, so it's hard to say it's doing great in the meta, right? Clefable, I mean, all supports are great. This is probably closer to A. I'm going to keep it B+ right now. It's probably closer to A. For our B tier, still got the B tier. Sylveon, I'm actually going to move Sylveon down to C. I feel like Sylveon is just not really doing it lately. Not a bad Pokemon at all, but I think they maybe over-nerfed this thing to try to compensate for what they were fixing with it with Mystical Fire, and they may have over-nerfed Hyper Voice. We'll have to see. I don't have terrible games with it, but I also feel like it's hard to close out games with it. Cinder, Duraludon, Dragapult, I'd keep them all here in B. I think they're all totally fine. You might be able to move some of them up to B+. Dragapult can snowball really well. Duraludon, honestly, Duraludon's probably always better than people give it credit for, which is something I've said 8,000 times in this short video already. But I do think it's overlooked a lot. I think this Pokemon is not played often, but the people who do play it are extremely good with it and win games because of it. Veno, I think, is fine. I actually am not that hot on Venusaur and its changes. They nerfed Solar Beam a little while back, and then they buffed Giga Drain. I don't think it was that great. I'm going to move Gengar up. I actually think Gengar is pretty solid. Its issue is it works actually better, in my opinion, in solo queue, just because with your opponents not being able to communicate more, it's harder to pin down exactly what Gengar is doing. And if you can get a Gengar to start chaining, Shadow Ball Dream Eater through the enemy team, or you can get Gengar to really set up a great Hex Sludge Bomb, I think you can actually rip through enemies. It's a speedster. Speedsters are all quite strong. Same thing with Zeraora, to be fair. I'm going to move it up to B+. I just think it's hard to take a strong speedster and say it's not able to carry games. It definitely can. Like, good Gengar players can carry for sure. Phalanx is fine. It's maybe a little better than this, but again, I truly never see this Pokemon. Aegislash is also okay. I think it's great in the right hands, but you just don't see it much, so I don't know how well it plays into a lot of the meta here. Buzzwole, I'm going to move up to at least our B+ tier. I think Buzzwole is probably even better than this. I think it's always better than this. It's been better than this, but it just was not having a lot of great success in ranked for whatever reason. Maybe there's just something about how it plays later in the game. It couldn't close things out. I feel like I have fantastic games with this Pokemon, and maybe it's just my personal play style, but I do think it's probably better than middle of the road. Wiggly, Sableye, Comfey. All solid. Wiggly's a solid tank, which is probably fair enough to move it up to our B+ tier. Sableye is a weird one. I just think for most Sableye players are not going to get any value out of this, and most team comps don't know how to work with it. So for that reason, the highest I can put it is B. Comfey is better when things are more broken. It's still pretty insane. Let's keep it in the B tier. Actually, let's never change it. C tier, Sylveon. Scissor, I'm going to move Scissor up. I don't know how high I want to take it. I think B+ might be pushing it, honestly. The thing about Scissor is your opponents have to be foolish enough to brawl with Scissor. So if they are that foolish, a nice little buff to it. It was small, but it's something. A nice little buff to it does give you a few moments where you would survive where you otherwise wouldn't, which gives Scissor the ability to continue going and going and going, like the Energizer Buddy of Pokemon Unite. Did I say Energizer Buddy? The Energizer Buddy barrier of Pokemon Unite. Crustle is actually better than C tier. I'm annoyed by its nerfs, but it's better than C tier. I'm going to move it to B. It's probably even better than that. It's probably B+. Cram, you can win games with it, but man, I was playing Dive the other day, and you can really feel the length of time they put on that move. It's considerable. Goodra, I'm going to move up with Crustle. Goodra doesn't seem to win games, but it's not actually as bad as people think. Boy, I've said that a lot. What are you all thinking? Azu is probably closer to B, to be fair. Machamp is actually probably closer to B, to be fair as well. Char, I'm not moving Char out of the C tier. I don't know what they were thinking nerfing this thing so hard. I'm not moving Char. I think this is about where it's at. Maybe it's closer to B. I think Mewtwo X is also not truly terrible, but I do think it feels underwhelming. I'm going to move T-Tar up as well. I had it in the Decidueye Memorial tier after it being a little underwhelming and then getting nerfs, but I actually think just with how the game plays out, the fact that this thing can become a raid boss, I can't move it any lower than the B tier, so that's where I'm going to put it. Nothing is going to be in our Decidueye Memorial tier this week, as we are now going to talk about Tinkaton. So Tink, I'm going to put you in D tier while we talk about you here. Tinkaton's interesting. When it released, I thought it was really good. One build in particular, and then they buffed a few different builds, but it still is one build in particular. It is Gigaton Hammer and Thief. It is a raid boss of a Pokemon, much like Tyranitar. If this thing can get online, fully stacked up, it has an unstoppable move with a massive knock-up. You also are stacking this like percentage attack passive throughout the game. I just think Tink is pretty dang good. It's not... It might be close to S tier. I'm going to put it up into our A+ tier here. I don't think it really reaches the heights of our S tier or God tier, but it's right up there with a ton of these all-rounders in my opinion. And then the real question is, who is in our God tier this week? I do think it's still probably Psyduck. And I'm not really sure what else I would put there. I actually think the game is decently balanced right now with a few, Pokemon that seem to really shine at different moments. I don't think it's crazy for it to be Eldy here in the God tier. But I am going to once again place Psyduck in this tier. I think they still probably have some room to go with Disable and Surf and everything going on with it. I could be wrong, however. This might be a spot that another Pokemon deserves. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. I will see you all next time. We did it, guys. We did it.